Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to the It's Attainable Real Estate Investing Show. It's episode number 13. In episode number 12, I introduced the deal analyzer, which we use to calculate whether this real estate asset is a deal or is it not a deal. Let's get back to it.
Welcome to the It's Attainable Real Estate Investing Show, where you will learn about investing, the power of real estate investing, and how to invest in it. Whether you have the time or even if you don't, you're going to see it's attainable either way. And now your host, who always wants to share knowledge with you, Christopher Balkin.
So, as we continue from where we finished in the last show, we're going to continue using our deal analyzer. The deal analyzer is going to let us document and calculate our income and our expenses. Remember that income minus expenses equals cash flow, and cash flow is one of the income opportunities of real estate assets. And I would say it's one of the most important income opportunities when it comes to evaluating if the real estate asset is a deal or is it not a deal? So yeah, it's really important when it comes to analyzing the real estate asset. In the last show, we started inputting our income. And with real estate assets, no matter what the asset is, you'll recall what I said, that income is going to come from mostly rental income or mostly lease income. And that's whether it's a building that a restaurant resides in, whether it's a mall that stores reside in, whether it's a building that a factory or manufacturing is done in, or whether it's an apartment building where people reside in. For the most part, majority of the income for the real estate asset is going to be rent or lease income. Now there may be some ancillary income depending on the real estate asset. For example, a multifamily apartment building or community may have coin laundry income if there's a laundry facility on site, or off-street parking for a carport or garage, pet rent, or things of that nature. But by and large, majority of the income is going to be rent or lease income. So we input that here. We showed our monthly rent. We talked about vacancy and what a vacancy or economic vacancy factor is and how that leaves the income after that. And then we just started to broach the topic of expenses and what's involved in the expenses. The first expense we arrived at was principal and interest from the mortgage. As you put in the price that you're going to purchase the property for, and you put in the interest rate and the term, all those things make up the mortgage or the monthly mortgage payment. So I showed you those calculations here. I won't go into them again because we do need to move forward in this show, but we talked about it in depth in the last show. So all these things, the term, the interest rate, the purchase price of the real estate asset, and the down payment, all of that makes up the principal and interest monthly payment for the mortgage. Next to the mortgage, taxes are going to be one of your largest expenses, or this is property taxes as it relates to the real estate asset, not income taxes or personal taxes or sales taxes. It's property tax. Property tax typically is collected by the local jurisdiction of where the property or the real estate asset sits, so maybe the city or the county or township. And taxes go to different things. It's usually for governmental services. A portion may go to the school district, but for the most part, it's government services and school district, and there may be some other things that they allocate the taxes to. Now, unfortunately, property taxes never go away. So even after the mortgage is paid off, this property tax expense is still going to be there once a year, twice a year, quarterly, or however they're paid for that particular jurisdiction or region. So how do you determine what the taxes are? The property taxes are typically some percent of the value of the property. So how do you find that out? Usually this information is public record, so you may be able to find it online if the county or the city or the township or whoever's authoring the property taxes for the region, you may be able to find it on their website by simply inputting the address of the property. And it'll show the prior taxes, the the value that those taxes are based on, the current taxes if the taxes are paid or if they're delinquent. Now, one thing I mentioned there, I mentioned if they're delinquent. Certainly, if you acquire a real estate asset, you need to ensure that the taxes are paid upon transfer of the property to you, the new investor or investors, unless it's somehow negotiated into the agreement that you, the new investor or investors, will pay for the taxes, any delinquent taxes. But otherwise, you'll want to make sure those are cared for, paid by the time the property is transferred to you, the new investor or investors. Otherwise, in many regions, the county or the township or the city can foreclose or take the real estate asset from you if the taxes are not paid. Because property taxes are important, even though they're expensive. It is, again, what I said, it pays the governmental services. So when you think about your potentially the police force and the fire department and the school district and city services such as the roads and maybe waste and recycle collection, those things have to happen for the city to be able to function. So property taxes are really important for the cities, the counties, townships, etc. So if they're not getting that, eventually they can foreclose the property and take it from you, the investor or investors, and resell it to someone else who they believe will pay the property taxes. So of course, delinquent property taxes are a problem. So make sure those are paid by the time property is transferred or acquired. The other important factor to consider with property taxes is evaluating whether or not they change the price of the property taxes when you do acquire the real estate asset. So it varies drastically from city to city, township to township, region to region. Sometimes the property taxes stay the same when they're transferred from one party to the other, or in other words, sold and then purchased. Sometimes they change, and they change to the new purchase price of the property. So if the property was previously valued at $300,000 and now you're going to acquire it for $500,000, the property taxes will therefore increase to a percent of the new purchase price of the property, because the property taxes are usually, again, typically calculated on the value or some percent of the value of the property. So if you purchase the property for a higher price than it was previously valued at by the county or the city or township or the region again, then it's assumed by those municipalities that the price you purchased it at is the new value. It is the real value of the property. So they increase the property taxes, or they can increase the property taxes in some municipalities. Sometimes they stay the same and they get reevaluated every 4 years or 6 years or 3 years. It just varies from region to region, place to place. So it's really important to be able to understand the property taxes, what they are, whether they're delinquent, and whether they will change in price from what they are now before you purchase the real estate asset to what they will be after you purchase the real estate asset. Because since property taxes next to the mortgage are one of your largest expenses in the budget, and the budget directly equals your cash flow, then the property taxes, if miscalculated, can strongly impact what you have left over in your cash flow. So if the property taxes are $16,000 a year, and that's what you have in your expense list or your category or your budget for expenses, but then after you acquire the property, they immediately change to $20,000 a year, your cash flow goes from $38,000 a year to $34,000 a year. So it can drastically change. So pay important attention to all these categories, but certainly pay attention to property taxes. Now, I said you can find the property tax information on the municipality or county's website, but some of these details, like I just explained about how the property taxes might change upon the sale and purchase of a real estate asset, that may not be well explained or explained at all on their website. So use the website to find the phone number to pick up the phone and talk to someone. And when the representative answers the phone and you talk to them, explain the exact situation clearly. Explain that you're purchasing the real estate asset. It's currently valued at this price according to their website, and you're going to purchase it for this price, and you want to know how the property taxes may change, if at all, whether it's at the time of purchase or sometime in the future. So again, very important. So pick up the phone and talk with someone from the municipality to verify and confirm how the property taxes will affect you as an investor or your investors. So what's next? We got principal and interest, taxes, and insurance. So insurance is simple. It is protection for the real estate assets. So this is sometimes called landlord insurance, but it's really protection for the property, insurance for the property in terms of physical damage. So wind and storms and fire, maybe vandalism or theft. And then also the other side is liability. So in case of perhaps some type of lawsuit that may come from the property, the classic example I think I've shared before is a slip and fall or some other type of liability that might become associated with the real estate asset or the property. Those are two parts that you want to ensure are covered in the insurance policy: physical damage to the property and liability. You can get this type of insurance from some of the same companies that offer homeowners insurance or auto insurance. So some of the major brands that are out there. There's some that specialize in real estate assets or properties. And you can reach out to me if you've got some questions about some of those companies or some specifics or recommendations. But we've used quite a few and really no claims to have. And hopefully if we do have any claims, those organizations or companies will stand behind the policies they have written for us. But again, physical damage you want to be protected from, and then liability as well. And some of the same companies that provide homeowners insurance for a single family home will also provide insurance for a real estate asset or property, potentially no matter the size. They scale down to single families and up to very large properties. How might you determine the cost of this insurance? You'll have to just call one of the agents. There's some rule of thumbs you can go by, and we can talk about those in the future. You can reach out if you have some questions in terms of maybe a certain amount of dollar cost of insurance per square foot of the property. So there's some rules of thumbs there, but to get the most accurate quote, you'll want to shop around and talk with some agents to give them the address, and they may want to understand the condition of it and some specifics about the property. And in a relatively quick amount of time, they can provide you an insurance quote for the property. One tip is when you're looking at the trailing 12 or the income and expense statement from the real estate asset that the seller or the seller's agent may have provided, their insurance may vary and could vary drastically from what your insurance quote will be. They may have multiple properties and may have a discount for such a thing there. They may have their personal auto insurance or business auto insurance tied into that for some type of discount there. So if we look at the insurance, you recall from the last show, or episode 11 rather, we had a trailing 12 months expense and income statement from a real estate opportunity. Here was what they shared: their monthly expense for their insurance and then their total for the year. If I were to get a quote, or if we were to get a quote, or if you were to get a quote rather, for this real estate asset or this property, it could be different from this. It could be similar, but it could be different. So you don't want to leverage what they have. You want to make sure you call and get a quote from your agent or the agents that you may want to work with. So now we make our way into the utilities, such as electric. We'll say trash or waste removal is a utility as well. Water, and I don't have it listed here, but gas or natural gas could be an expense as well for the real estate asset. The utilities listed here should be for common areas, so hallways or parking lot lights or clubhouse lights and heat and things related with common areas. My recommendation when it comes to real estate investing is for tenants to always pay for their own usage, and that includes electricity and water and natural gas or propane. You'll see sometimes as you study your market and look at rental listings or rental comparables in the market to see what's available and how much it costs and what it looks like, you'll see sometimes listings for vacancies, for example, in a multifamily apartment building where all the utilities are included in the rent. And in my opinion, that is great for the tenant. They've got a bundle and their price is capped each month, but that is not good. Again, in my opinion, my recommendation is that the tenant's usage should be paid for by the tenant. It's possible that the rent or lease that the tenant pays, having all the utilities rolled into one price, could cover all the cost of the utilities and their usage, but it's possible that it may not. It's possible, one example we joke about in the industry, it's possible that the tenant might have the air conditioning on and the window open, or they might have the heat on and the window open. So where possible, we want to protect from that scenario, and we want to ensure that if the tenant's consuming something, they pay for those consumables, including usage of utilities. Now, there may be situations where this is not always possible. Perhaps, and I'll come back to perhaps in a moment because there's maybe some ways around that too, but it may be possible in the case where utilities are not individually metered. Maybe there's one utility meter for the entire structure and the entire building, or one water meter for the entire building, which is somewhat more common, or one gas meter for the entire structure or building, which is sometimes common too. So in those cases, there's ways around that too. The ratio utility billing system, which I've talked about, and we can talk about it some more in the future. Or again, if you have questions about it, you can reach out to me and we can discuss it in that way too. But we want to exhaust all options to ensure that the tenant is paying for the usage that they consume. It's their usage. Why should anyone else pay for the usage that gets consumed by the person who lives or resides, or in the case of retail or industrial, the tenant is still consuming such energy or such gas or such water. So how do we find out what the cost of these utilities are? And we're going to say common area utilities, right? Because we're only going to pay common area utilities, aren't we? So how do we find out what the cost of these common area utilities are? Well, this is on the trailing 12 months or T12 expense and income statement for the property that you'll get from the seller or the seller's agent. You can usually trust that information, but you'll want to reconfirm that with the local utility. So you'll want to call the local electric utility and ask them, on average, they will at least give you, they may not give you the exact bill each month because you don't own the property, you don't pay the bills yet, but they'll give you an average, and you'll want to confirm what the average of the electric and the gas and the water utilities are for the common areas. And they'll have no problem providing that to you. So you can call the electric utility, call the water utility, and then call the gas utility to get that information. And it should match up to what's on the profit and loss statement or expense statement from the seller or the seller's agent. And if it doesn't, they've got some explaining to do. Now, trash may be the exception. And in that exception, it may be tied in with lawn care and snow removal or just landscaping in general. Because trash at times, and depending on the size of the real estate asset or real estate property, could be handled by the local municipality. So they may pick up the trash weekly. Or it could be handled by a private organization who simply places a dumpster or dumpsters at the site and then will come and empty it routinely or as the need requires. In the cases where waste removal or trash is handled privately by private companies or organizations, you'll want to reach out to them and get a quote for their services. The quote should be similar to what's on the trailing 12 or the income and expense statement for the real estate asset that you receive from the seller, but you still should trust but verify. Now, lawn care and snow removal and any other type of routine landscaping, that may or may not be on the expense and income statement from the seller or the seller's agent. They may just have lawn care and snow removal and other routine things lumped in with maintenance and repairs, which we'll get to in a moment. So similar to a private trash company or organization, you'll want to contact your preferred lawn care and snow removal and landscaping company, or look to others locally or online for recommendations for those services that you need for your real estate asset. Speaking of recommendations, property management is next on the list. I expressed, I think, in episode 11 and probably once prior to that too, and I'll probably continue to talk about it in the future too, but property management is very important. I'll sum it up and say this may be the only interaction that your clients or your tenants have with you or your organization, your company, or you, the investor. So it's very important. Next to providing great places for people to reside or stay or use, customer service is right up there in terms of priorities. And your property managers are who are interacting with the customer. So get referrals, get recommendations, have plenty of interviews, do all of that to make sure you select the right property manager. The costs of the property manager are going to vary. You can reference what's on the seller's income and expense statement, mostly just to make sure it's there and accounted for, but you're going to want to get quotes from the property managers that you have interviews or discussions with, or maybe you already have a preferred property manager in the area. You're going to want to get a quote from them yourself. Typically, I would say you should budget for 5 to 10% of the incoming rent or lease payments to budget for the monthly or annual cost of the property manager. 5 to 10% can seem small when we're talking small numbers in terms of incoming rental or lease payments, but it can be a large swing. 5 to 10% can be a large swing too. It's usually going to vary on how many units that property manager is managing for you. Is this the only property? How big is this property? How small is it? How many units? Are there other properties in the area that this property manager also manages for you? All those things and more can go into the negotiation of a price with the property manager. You'll also want to ask the property manager what other costs or fees could be due to you. One fee, for example, can be turning over a unit. So a property manager may charge for the leasing or the marketing and the showings in trying to get a vacant unit rented. So that may have a cost, a substantial cost, maybe the cost of 1 month's rent. So you want to just talk with the property manager, and besides their monthly or annual fee that they charge, what other costs or fees could arise that may be due to the investor or owner? Okay, so moving on, what about capital expenditures or reserves? What is that? So capital expenditures or reserves, I'm going to use another tab here in this spreadsheet or analyzer to show you that. Capital expenditures as it relates to real estate assets, I'm going to define it as a replacement or improvement or installation of items that have a predetermined lifespan. So these are not things that would be maintenance, such as repairs and leaks and things of that nature. These are things that have a predetermined lifespan that you replace or improve or install. Examples are shown here. So as we look at this list, and these replacement cost amounts, don't use this in your analysis. Please do not. A lot of this is going to vary on the property. For example, the first item in the list here is a roof. A roof is directly impacted by the size of the roof, the slope of the roof. Lots of different factors go into the roof. The type of roof, whether it's metal or asphalt, endless amounts of variations with the cost of a roof. So do not use this $10,000 replacement cost here. Now the lifespan of a roof, this can vary some too, depending on the type of roof, but a typical asphalt or slope roof should last you nowadays, if installed properly, about 25 years, maybe 30, maybe 35, but you should be able to be conservative here with this number, and 25 years should be okay. So this spreadsheet is just saying if the replacement cost of a roof was $10,000 for a particular property, the property that you're looking to analyze, and that roof was just replaced today, and it has a lifespan of 25 years, and the cost per year, $10,000 divided by 25 years, would equal $400 a year or $33 a month. So if you're going to hold on to the property for 25 years, you're going to own it or invest in it or have it otherwise for 25 years, then this is the amount of dollars that you should set aside as an expense or a savings account. Set it aside for the roof to be replaced. That way, when it comes time to replace the roof, you already have the dollars set aside, and it's just a check you write, and it gets done by the contractor or the vendor. Similar for these other items. A hot water heater, a hot water tank, $800 might be an average replacement cost for parts and labor, but it's going to depend on the size of the tank. Maybe all of these are going to depend on the region when it comes to labor. Some areas are high cost, especially here in the U.S. There's some parts of the U.S. that a lot of things cost more, and some regions where it costs less. So this is going to vary from region to region, inside the U.S. and out. But the example is the same. $800 divided by 12 years is $67 a year, or $5.56 a month. A hot water tank probably should last 12 years. I know the warranties on some range from 6 to 12 years, so maybe 12 years is a good number to go by. Some of them may last longer. Some of the older ones, from what I've seen, do last longer. but there seems to be some type of consistency that the new ones do not. But we've got 12 years here. Appliances. So this is going to be dependent on the type of real estate asset. Maybe apartments have appliances that the owner or the investor owns and would replace periodically. If it's a small apartment building or a single family home, then maybe $2,000 is a start for appliances, but appliances can be costly. When you talk about a stove and refrigerator and maybe other small appliances, microwave, if you provide that, times the number of units in an apartment building, the cost could be astronomical. But they typically have a lifespan. 10 years could be very conservative on the conservative side, but probably can get a little bit more out of the appliances in terms of them actually working. In terms of style, that's a different thing. It's going to be up to you on whether you keep up with the latest trends and whether you go from white to black to stainless to whatever the next fad or phase might be when it comes to styles and colors of appliances. But that all depends on your competition. So you're going to look at what the market that your real estate asset, if it's a multifamily property or multifamily apartment building, what do the competing buildings have in their units in terms of appliances? Now, if this is a factory or a restaurant, those places may bring their own appliances. A factory may not have appliances. A restaurant might bring their own commercial appliances and supply those. So this cost, again, varies from zero, depending on the type of real estate asset, to a whole lot more, depending on the size of the real estate asset. Driveway and parking lot, kind of show here 50 years. Going to depend on the size of the parking lot or driveway. Going to depend on if it's asphalt or concrete, the region of the world that it might be in, if it's colder weather or warmer weather, all those things factor in. So again, please don't take these numbers as factual for your individual real estate asset. It's going to vary, and you'll want to get some bids or quotes from vendors or contractors so you can be prepared. HVAC, again, going to vary depending on the real estate asset and the size of the real estate asset. Flooring, of course, again, it's going to vary on the real estate asset. Maybe a multifamily apartment building has carpet that needs to be replaced, or do you go with some other type of vinyl flooring or tile flooring? And going to depend again on the competition when it comes to certain types of real estate assets, especially multifamily apartment buildings. What do the surrounding or competing properties have? Again, going to vary on the real estate asset. A factory may just have a concrete floor, and maybe that never needs to be replaced in the time that you own or invest in that particular real estate asset. Plumbing. Typically, plumbing should obviously last a whole lot longer than 5 years, but it's going to depend on the generation of the plumbing. Maybe the plumbing is good for life. It's 20 years or 25 years or 30 years or 50 years, but it's going to depend on the generation of plumbing. There is some plumbing that's been installed, and in later years it was found that that probably wasn't the best product to be manufactured for the application. So some of that plumbing has to be redone. So important to look at the plumbing that the type of generation of plumbing that's in the real estate asset. A property inspector, when you go to acquire the property, will be able to define what the condition of all these items are and give you the estimated lifespan of all these items that are left as well. And you can use that to input into your sheet here. For example, if the roof was new and it was 25 years, has 25 years of life left, you have a long time before you have to replace the roof, so you can save less per month. But if the roof only had 5 years left in it, then you need to save a whole lot more per month in order to replace that roof in 5 years. So we move down to windows and paint. Windows, again, probably generational. Windows should last a long time unless they get broken. We typically would come from aluminum or steel windows, and now there's vinyl and fiberglass, but typically windows will stay there, and the later generation ones are pretty energy efficient. But again, generational, and it'll depend on each real estate asset in terms of what windows are there and how many windows. Paint, still going to depend on the real estate asset and how large or what type of structure it is. Are we talking about a factory where there may be little or less walls to paint? Are we talking about a apartment building or a single family home where there's lots of interior walls and maybe exterior to paint? Exterior may be brick, or it may be wood or vinyl or something that needs to be more so maintained with paint. cabinets and countertops. This is certainly going to be closer when it comes to real estate assets to multifamily apartment buildings or structures or single family homes where you have counters and cabinets in your kitchens. And similarly, they should last for some time unless damaged by those that reside there. But similar to flooring and appliances, it's generational, but sometimes it can change or may need to be changed depending on the phase or by the competing properties around your property. We come down to structure and we think about foundation or framing. Should be good for the life of the structure, life of the building, but adjustments could be needed. Foundations can fail. Things can happen in the earth or the ground that cause remediation to be done. Certainly this is something the property inspector will review upon purchase or potential acquisition of the real estate asset. And if it's something outside of his scope that he finds that is concerning, he or she will recommend the appropriate specialist or engineer when needed. We look at smaller components like garage doors and landscaping. All still the same. It's going to vary on the size of the property, going to depend on the real estate asset if there are any garage doors at all. But the definition is the same for all these things. My definition is the replacement or improvement or installation of items that have a predetermined or should have a predetermined lifespan. Now, certainly all these things could fail prematurely. A roof could fail prematurely. A water heater could fail prematurely. Hopefully all these things don't fail at the same time, and they shouldn't, but certainly these things can fail prematurely or damage could occur with the roof, and you'll have insurance for some of these things. But some of these rules of thumb, just setting aside dollars for the lifespan that's left in these items, you shouldn't go wrong in doing this planning. As we go back to the other tab in our deal analyzer, capital expenditures, reserves, you can see here we put 5 to 10% or $300 per unit per year if it's a multifamily apartment building. Some of these are bank requirements, banks or lenders, depending on who your lender is going to be to who's going to have the mortgage on the real estate asset. They'll have some of these requirements that you set aside this amount of dollars in your budget because they know that things will go wrong. There will be things that need to be replaced or improved, and if you're not prepared to do so, the building or the real estate asset can get in trouble in a hurry. For example, a leaky roof can cause many other problems to fail. Firstly, your tenants won't be very happy with the roof leaking, so they may depart, and if they depart, then the income could decrease, and if income continues to go away or decrease, eventually you may not be able to pay the mortgage to the bank, and the bank definitely does not want that. So it's a domino effect set in motion if you're not planning for or prepared to take care of these capital expenditures when the time comes. Last on the list is maintenance or repairs. These are things that we're all probably used to. Things break, things fail, things need to be repaired. So plumbing leaks and light fixtures and light switches and electrical outlets. And recall I mentioned above here that sometimes lawn and snow and trash removal might be lumped into repairs too. But some amount of dollars that you set aside each month from the rental income or lease income that comes in to repair or fix things. It's going to depend on the real estate asset because a restaurant's maintenance or a retail store's maintenance or an industrial park or factory's maintenance or a tenant's maintenance may be different. For one thing, a factory or a retail store or a restaurant, they may have a lease with you where they pay for all the maintenance. Whereas a tenant in a multifamily apartment building, that's usually never the case. So it can vary vastly from real estate asset to asset. I show here 8%. That's based on looking at historical data for the last few years for real estate assets that we invest in. But it can vary from property to property, even within the same real estate asset class. For example, we started out with a 6% budget, and then we realized that looking at prior years that we were spending about 8%. So we decided for future years to budget for 8%. We probably could have budgeted for 10 just to protect us or plan even better, but the average you'll hear among peers or within the industry for multifamily real estate assets or apartment buildings and communities like we invest in is 5 to 10%. So 8% sounds about right for now. So you add all this up and you get a total amount of expenses. And income up here in the green minus expenses here in the orange equals cash flow. So for this particular example, so $120,000 in gross rental income minus a sum of $79,000 approximately in all expenses, including principal income from the mortgage, provides a cash flow of approximately $34,000. So is that good? Is it a good deal? Well, it's going to depend on you. I started this off by saying it depends on your goals. So is $34,000 helpful to you? Will that be beneficial to you and your family? Will it help your lifestyle? Will this be a good mix into the portfolio that you already have investments in, whether it's stock market or just a savings account? Does this help? And if it does, and if it's enough, that answers the question. It is a good deal. Now there's some other metrics we're going to get into in the next show, just some key indicators that we want to measure our real estate investment or a real estate asset against. And one thing we're going to see among others is compared to other potential investments that are available in the world we live in. How does a real estate asset like this measure up? These indicators right down here. I've shown them in lavender down below here in the deal analyzer. Let's talk about them in the next show. So what did you think? It's a deal, right? $34,000 in additional income added to your household. Would that be helpful to you? Let me know what you think. Is it a deal or is it not a deal? I want to hear from you. Go to neelyrealty.com/podcast. That's NILEEREALTY.com/podcast. I'm showing it at the bottom of the screen. Click on ask a question and let me know. Leave a comment. Let me know if you think it's a deal or not. And also, definitely share the show with someone else if it was helpful to you. And I'll see them, and I'll also see you back here next time for the next show.
You have been listening to the It's Attainable Real Estate Investing Show, sharing transparent knowledge on investing and the powerful impact real estate investing can have on your wealth and lifestyle. Follow or subscribe to the show using your favorite podcast app so you'll know firsthand when a new show is released, or visit neelyrealty.com/podcast and see the show there. That's NILEE Realty.com/podcast.